part of a video with Dave Rubin and Michael Knowles, okay? And I haven't seen Dave Rubin in a long time, and so I listened to a little bit of it, and Michael Knowles starts the video talking about how people are starting to rethink Ronald Reagan after putting him up on this pedestal for 25 years. You know, the thing about Ronald Reagan, people don't realize this about Ronald Reagan, okay? Ronald Reagan dealt with a lot of the same things that President Trump is dealing with, all right? Ronald Reagan did not have some free ride. You know, people look back on Ronald Reagan and praise him, including Democrats today, but what they forget is they were after Ronald Reagan non-stop. You know, when he ran for president the first time against Jimmy Carter, he was 69 years old. And on Inauguration Day, he was 70. And at the time, he was the oldest president. But during the election, before he won the election, the left-wing media were talking about how he was going to be 70. He was going to be the oldest president. They were accusing him of having Alzheimer's very openly in the media, the mainstream media, which is all we had back then. We only had mainstream media back in 1980. And they spent an entire year talking about Alzheimer's. When Ronald Reagan was president, they used to do these fake stories that senior citizens, because he had cut off Social Security and Medicaid benefits, the senior citizens had to eat cat food to survive. Remember, any of you remember these stories? And in fact, I remember you would even see it in television shows. There was an episode of Highway to Heaven with Michael Landon. Remember Michael Landon, great Michael Landon? And this one episode, he was working in a grocery store, and there was an old man who had to was eating cat food because Ronald Reagan had cut his benefits. And the coverage and what Ronald Reagan had to deal with was just as bad as Trump. With the media, maybe it was even worse, because during Reagan's era, since there was no new media back then, you only had there were no cable news networks in the very beginning, and you had the three networks and the major newspapers, Washington Post, New York Times, and they were after him like no one's business for 8 years. CNN came in later, but was not really significant of a player then until 91 when Bush was president. But so I'm listening to Michael Knowles and Dave Rubin. They have no idea what they're talking about. You know, the way that Ronald Reagan was treated, people just forget, because it's so long ago that people don't care anymore about the partisanness of that. So Democrats say good things about Ronald Reagan, but they were just as nasty to President Reagan as they are to Trump. I know it doesn't seem that way, but it is true, okay? It is so true. And the way they treated his staff and administration, I mean, look what they did to Alexander Haig on the day Reagan was shot by John Hinckley. You know, Alexander Haig had a life of great service, and they made him a mockery. So, you know, it's Ronald Reagan is up on a pedestal because, like President Trump, he deserves it. And you know, President Trump, who was a big supporter of President Reagan, modeled a lot of his campaign and presidency after President Reagan. And if you know, they were always, the Democrats, talking about impeaching President Reagan, just like with Trump, because of his, you know how they go after Trump with his, well, on everything, but as an example, they go after Trump on his tariff negotiations, right? They were doing the same thing to Ronald Reagan in the arms race against Russia. And they were always talking about and making moves to impeach Ronald Reagan. So just to sum it up, Dave Rubin and Michael Knowles, when it comes to Ronald Reagan, they don't know what they're talking about. They have no understanding of it. And, you know, I didn't know Ronald Reagan personally, but I lived through it. You know, I was a child, but I lived through it, and I remember it very, very well. I was in when he left office in '88, I was 17, you know, in '88. So, you know, I believe, and I was 13 in '84 when he got reelected. So, you know, I remember it very well. Whoever the Republican is always ripped by the mainstream media and the left hardcore. And then later in life, they praise them. I mean, like, look now at George W. Bush. They love George W. Bush, the mainstream media and the liberals. When George W. Bush was president, they wanted to put him and Dick Cheney on trial for war crimes at the International Court in The Hague. They were always talking about this, always talking about impeaching. So, you know, whenever I hear people look back on these past Republican presidents, the left have always, look what they did to Richard Nixon, right? You know, ran him out of office, and the vice president, Spiro Agnew, ran them both out of office, had a coup. So Republican presidents are always put through things. Don't think that because they don't kick them around anymore when they're dead and buried, that they had free rides. Trump loves Jesse Jackson. You know, with President Trump saying good things about Jesse Jackson, what you leave out is, what did he say? He said some nice things about Jesse Jackson. Then he said he hated Obama. Did you see that? So, you know, President Trump, what he did with his praise of Jesse Jackson, it was not so much about praising Jesse Jackson, it was about causing division with the Democrats and getting that jab in that he hated Obama, right? Causing all kinds of problems. President Trump always knows President Trump understands media manipulation. Now, on the show today, one of the top Democrats is predicting a MAGA Trump victory in the midterms, and that's going to be my lead story. I'll share that with you on the next stream when the show opens up, and I'll take your calls. I got a lot to cover today, but the Democrats are in a panic and are predicting a MAGA red wave victory, and I'll share that with you right at the top of the show. It's going to be my lead on the show this morning. So you don't want to miss that. If you're new, make sure you subscribe. Okay, this is where MAGA comes to talk. And in the next stream, I'll be live in the studio taking your calls. But President Trump knew exactly what he was doing. President Trump knows how to manipulate the media. And I'm glad that the Nancy Guthrie case isn't going to be hijacking the media anymore. I mean, I hope they find her alive. But the case has been in the news a little too. It's not that it shouldn't be in the news, it just shouldn't be the dominant story in the news like it has been in the last couple of weeks. So we got to get back to what is important, and that is, of course, President Trump and a red wave in November. So I'm going to open up with that, and I'll share with you. I've got the audio of it, and I'll share it at the top, that the Democrats are in a panic over the red wave in November. And I think when I share this with you, most MAGA people will agree with me when I share this with you. You know, the trolls, the liberals, the Democrats, they're always going to disagree. But you shall see. So much to cover today. You know, have you noticed how much Obama's been in the news? Obama's been in the news nonstop for about the last 4 days, okay? Talking about aliens and Area 51 and Trump and the meme and all this. And it's almost like he's planning on running again in 2028 against President Trump. Like he's setting the stage to run, isn't it, Obama? But that's, you know, President Trump in that praise of Jesse Jackson, it was really about taking the jab at Obama. He hated Obama, which is true, right? Jesse Jackson hated Obama. So, you know, that's that. Pilot Mike, she's dead. Well, you know, but it's not really appropriate to say that until, you know, we have some confirmation. We got to hope for the best. We got to hope for the best. That's right. Okay, I turned the wipers on by mistake. If you're new, make sure you subscribe. This is where MAGA comes to talk. Yeah, so, but I got a lot of things to cover. There's some great new polls out. showing that Republicans are leading in all the important categories. You know, so we've got so much to go. There's so many positive things going on, and because the Nancy Guthrie case has hijacked the news, none of them have been discussed really. So I'm going to cover all of that. And you know, one thing I talked about on my most recent podcast was about New York. Welcome. That, you know, all these, you know, what Massey and these never Trumpers are doing is trying to get this whole dialogue going about Epstein. And that's a topic that I'm not going to allow to be discussed on the program. If anyone references it at all, you're gone. We're not going to discuss it. It's now, if there's a major news story with it, I'm always open to it, but I'll bring it up. But no one. It's just it is textbook distraction. Why? Because I don't do. I'm not cold case files, and I don't discuss old crime cases. I don't do a true crime channel. My program's about news and politics, not cold crime cases, right? I'm not ID. There's a lot of true crime podcasts out there and true crime YouTube channels, you know. So go to those. Go to the true crime YouTube channels, and they can cover it. But I'm not, and I'm not going to discuss it anymore unless there's a major news story here and there. But I don't even see that happening, and it's just a textbook distraction. And most of the people that call me about it are perverted. I mean, they're men, and they just like to say all these perverted words. They're creeps. Yeah, and anyone who references, that's it. No. And that, by the way, that even goes for open phones on, you know, Friday's show was open phones, right? Open Mega Mike Friday. That topic's not allowed on Open Mega Mike Friday. Nope. Nope. You can call all the other shows about it. All right. Everybody else is obsessed with the issue. I'm not. Now, if there's a new development, I'm always open to it, but it is a distraction. It has nothing to do with Trump. It has nothing to do with the MAGA movement or the midterm elections or the political landscape. It's being used as a political weapon. So that's it. It is a topic forbidden with me on my program. That's it. But talk about pretty much everything else. But there's a lot of things going on in the news that we've got to cover that are new and very relevant. It's raining a little bit. That's why my wipers just came on. We've had this drought in Florida. Now it's raining. We need it. My hedges are dying. All right. I can't get the wipers to stay off. If you're new, make sure you subscribe. On the next stream, I will be in the studio taking live calls. But my lead story today is the Democrat, top Democrat, is predicting a red wave in November. In fact, a Trump victory in the midterm elections. A Trump victory. I'll play the audio. You'll hear it, and you gotta love it. You gotta love. You know, this is a MAGA nation. The country's always been conservative. Liberals have been so overrepresented in everything. But there's a lot of panic going on with the SAVE Act. The Democrats know with the SAVE Act they are pretty much done. That's it. You know, state issued voter ID. That's it for the Democrats. They'll still win some elections here and there, but what's happening between the redistricting and the SAVE Act, and then coming up, we're going to get a new and accurate real census. That'll be the next move when all this is done. The Democrats' true representation will be seen in Congress, and it's the Democrat Party is basically a third party. You guys know, right? Basically a third party. They're nowhere near the size that you want to believe. The Libertarians are there's probably more Libertarians than there are Democrats today in the country. Really, they're an insignificant third party that is so overrepresented in Congress, in the media, and in the pundit class. the talking head class. Because if you think about it, you know, what is the Democrat platform today? Do they even have a platform? Who are they attracting? Your platform can't be hate on Trump. That's not a platform. They're wrong on every single issue. Now, if you're new to my channel, make sure you subscribe. I'm going to go get my coffee, and then on the next stream, I'll be in the studio taking your calls. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next.